Now let's look at the templates themselves a little bit closer, because I think before we continue, it's really important that we understand what these templates actually are. TemplateJS templates are very simple to learn and use because they are simple strings that will render HTML when they're being rendered, but they're almost like PHP, where the syntax is jumping in and out of JavaScript. Essentially, this makes the template codes very dynamic and powerful, yet very easy to learn since it's just JavaScript. So you can wrap HTML into an if and an else block to conditionally render this block of HTML versus that block of HTML. Now, the template code uses essentially, you'll see it here, there's a less than percent and then a percent greater than. Essentially, this is everything inside of this script tag is, for the most part, well, not for the most part, it is considered a string as the template is being rendered. It doesn't care what it is. It just says, hey, this isn't JavaScript. So it's just going to leave that code as is until it encounters one of these less than percents. And so there's two different kinds. There's this kind, which is the less than percent equals versus the less than percent. Essentially, what this is that the less than percent is used to execute non-rendering JavaScript, like if or var, and even like things like console log. The template code can also use this kind up here, which is the less than equal percent, followed by now the less than less than percent equals, followed by a percent greater than. So the ending is always the same. So you don't put an equal at the end of it. But whenever you use this one, it also renders or executes JavaScript. So it just runs a JavaScript expression. But whatever is the execution or whatever that expression outputs will be injected into the place where this code was. So this could do things like, in this case, there's some object called helper, and then there's a render function that's part of that, and then that is being passed in 1 parameter, comma, 2 parameters, comma, 3 parameters, comma, 4 parameters. This parameter is just a string. This is some object, some JavaScript variables, another JavaScript variable, and then another string. And all of that, whatever the return is of this particular function on this particular object, whatever's returned, that's what's going to render in the template in its place. Then it does the same thing again where it's doing this other one. This is how we render a template. So when we're calling this helper.render function and we call the template by name, we're basically saying, hey, using that template reference library that we looked at in the last video, we're saying, hey, go find that other template, go execute its code the exact same way that you did for this one. But when you get to, some JavaScript, you're either going to return and inject whatever's returned, or you're just going to execute the JavaScript and not return anything. So in this particular case for like this if else, and it's all just JavaScript. So I can do an else if in addition to this. So I can do an if, else if, else if, else if, else, and then close out that whole entire if block. But all JavaScript is fair game. It's just rendering or executing an expression of some kind. So it's really, really powerful and very, very cool. But essentially, this template will only output, it will only be called, it will only execute if this condition is true. If it's not true, Then it goes to the else clause, and then it renders this template, and then it renders this other template, and then it renders this template, and it renders this template, and it literally puts them all together. And because the rest of the thing was just a string, whichever one of these blocks executes and renders that template is just going to be inside of this div. But we could have did anything inside of here. If you want to add classes to this thing, if you want to add another container or change this div to a span or change it to, something else, you're more than welcome to do that. And so that's how these templates actually work. So that being the case, I want to actually just do a quick example of kind of putting all this into practice so that you can see how this works. So jumping back over here, let's say, for example, we've got this product block. So there's a product block that's being rendered, and then there's another product block. So for each one of the products that's being rendered on the page, there's a product block and another one, and so on and so forth. But it's just a template. So if I come back over to the template reference and I'm in the search result page, and here's that product block, I can go find where this Klevu landing template product block is in the code. It's right here. So if I want, I can just grab this whole entire script tag, come back over to my demo. I'm going to turn off the template hints. So I'm just going to remove that parameter from the URL to put everything back to normal. And I'm just using a demo that happens to have a built-in code editor and a place for me to put these templates. So I'm just going to put this in here. And because these are IDs, you don't want to have the same ID on here twice, and the default templates are being still included because it's part of the theme. So I'm just going to add the word custom so that there's a unique ID for this particular template. And here's a really cool trick. Remember those debug files that we were talking about a few videos ago? Here's the debug for the search page. There's actually a function called setTemplate. And so again, I don't want to have to memorize all of this stuff. So because of this, I'm just going to kind of borrow this line of code. And in this particular case, it's trying to do this scope template, set template, and then it does something, and then it does something else, and something else. But if I want, I can actually go ahead and find that product block. And here it is. Here's where that product block with the Klevu landing template product block is actually being added to the page. So if I wanted to, I could copy this whole entire line of code, come back over to my demo, go into my JavaScript, and then I'm going to borrow some code from our documentation. So in our documentation, it was telling us that for example, oh, actually, it's not even in here. But from that diagram that I showed you guys earlier, there's this Klevu.before activation. And all of these little functions take the first parameter, which is that scope that I was telling you about. Like, what is it that you're actually trying to affect? If I look at modify request, for example, just as an example, because they're all pretty much the same kind of thing. If I scroll down to the bottom, there's this thing where it says determining the scope. And I've been mentioning this throughout these videos to kind of drill this in, but essentially the quick search theme, I don't know why we called it a module in the documentation, it's actually a theme. The quick search theme, we refer to it with the scope of quick. The search result landing page is landing. Same thing with category merchandising, it's catnav. So in this particular case, landing is the one that I want. So that's the first parameter. And then the second parameter that you pass in here is this function that has a data and a scope. Now, this particular code, you're going to find this in your customization, so you don't have to worry about it. It's not actually in our documentation anywhere, but it's a function that you're going to find, and it's the same kind of code that's actually executing in here. It's just some other way. It's essentially that before activation is just a wrapper to hook into the same thing that's being triggered whenever this thing happens. So it's just hooking into the same exact thing to do the same exact thing. So I'm just going to grab this here, copy that, bring it over into my code, and I'm just going to paste that inside of this before activation. Again, the before activation is just a hook. I'm basically registering this function during this particular event whenever this thing is having that particular event. And so whenever that happens, this thing is saying Klevu, search, landing, get scope, then template, and then set template. All that stuff doesn't really matter. Here's where it gets interesting. There's this helper function called Klevu DOM helpers.getHTML. And essentially you just pass it a CSS selector. In this case, it's looking for the original template ID, but I renamed mine to custom. Then the rest of it, the next portion, is the name of the template that's being set. So what's the code is the first part, and what's the template name itself, and then true, just it is what it is. So once I do this, I'm going to hit save. And so nothing changed. The reason why nothing changed is because I didn't change the same template that was already there. I'm not using the original one. I am using this one, but it's not doing anything different. If I wanted to, I can come in here and, for example, somewhere in here is where it's rendering the name of the product. So the name of the product, here's the description of the product. All of this is the pricing of the product. Here's where the name of the product is actually being rendered. So here, there's this variable called updated product name. And remember that less than % equals. So whatever this variable is being output right there inside of this anchor tag. So there's this div that has an anchor tag in it with a data-id attribute on it. And here's an href of where it's supposed to go. And here we're using that expression where we're returning the value. So it's basically looking for some object called data local and then .url, whatever that is, that's what's going to be inside of the href for this particular rendering of this product block. Then there's a class attribute, and then there's a bunch of classes in here. There's a title that's got the same updated product name. If I look up here, there's actually, again, this one is not outputting anything, but I'm basically just saying var updated product name is equal to, and then it's this data local dot name. Data local is the most useful thing for the rendering of whatever template you happen to be rendering. So it's not, data local is not always the same thing. But when we're talking about a product block, when we're rendering a block for the product, data local represents the object that is the product. So I could do something like console.log and then data local. And so if I hit save and I've got my console open, oh, something happened. I've got my before activation for landing. I am on a search page. Klevu search landing, get scope, all this stuff. Go find the Klevu landing. Let's just verify that that's the right one. Maybe I misspelled it. That looks like custom. Klevu landing template product block custom. Yep, that looks like the right one. And I've got my console log here for data local. I'm going to put in something here just to make sure that this is actually rendering. Just test. Ah, my bad. I was filtering only for errors. So let me change it back to default. And sure enough, there we go. I've got test and then this object. This object, the very first one, happens to have a base price and a brand and a category and currency and discount and all this stuff. It's grams, ID, and eventually I will get to the name. The name of the first one is Jade Yoga Jacket. Jade Yoga Jacket. If I look at the price, it's $32. $32. The currency is euros. So it's formatting the price for euros. The next one, if I close this first one and I look at the second one, this one is the Nona Fitness Tank. Nona Fitness Tank. The price is $39. You get the point, right? This is how you can inspect what's actually happening with any of the templates at any moment in time. Now, the cool thing is it doesn't even have to be any of this. If I get rid of all of this, actually, I'm going to leave the LI, but I'm going to get rid of all of this JavaScript. Just leave the LI here. And it is putting this data local ID into this, LI, but who cares? At this point, my name is Juan. That's what I'm rendering. This is very, very powerful as far as what it is that's actually going on here. If I wanted to, I could do something like, let's see, var my flag is equal to, and then I can do some kind of a condition of some type. I could say data local dot price, and I'm going to put a plus in front of it just to turn it, because I believe it's a string. I'm going to turn it into a number, is less than, and I'll say 39. And then I'll come back over here and finish this up. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if, and now granted, I didn't have to do that. This is how powerful this is. I can sit there and say if my flag, and then here I want to do an if condition, and I'll do an else. If I can type here. And now I want to close everything off. I want to jump in and out of JavaScript, because I want to render some HTML in between. So I could say something, the price is below 39 euro, or the price is 39 or above euro. Right? But this could have been anything. This could have been rendering another template. This could have been a whole new section with all kinds of buttons and, anything. Because I'm going in and out of JavaScript here, but then I'm going back in and out of JavaScript over here, I technically could get rid of these two, because there's no reason. But it doesn't really matter. It's very, very efficient. The rendering engine that we use is super efficient. So you really don't even have to worry about this that much. It's a-okay to do this kind of stuff. But again, this could have been anything. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and then see what I get. So this one is below 39. This one's 39 and above, 39 and above. All the rest of these guys are 39 and above. Every single time the template is being rendered, it is re-varring that particular flag. So if I was to output this and take a look at actually what's happening, and I can go into the network tab. This is just a little bonus here. If I go into the fetch requests, you can look for K-search, pull that up. And if I look at preview, this is the response, this is the request. The request, everything that's inside of here is in line with what's capable of anything that you find in our storefront API. Those are the only things you can do. So if I look at, I happen to know that this is the search. It's called product list. That's what's being rendered here. If I go to the preview and I take a look at that product list, records is the array of the products that are returned. There's filters. Filters are the things that are being rendered over here on the side. So the first one has a key and a label of tags. That's what that is. There's also an array of options. The very first one is machine. The second one is cotton. The system, when it's rendering these templates, all it's doing is using exactly what that data is that came in. The count is 229 for the first one. It's 157 for the second one, so on and so forth. It's not doing anything that's not, traceable back to the data. But if I look at for example, I don't know, I'm just going to just hop over to the 8th thing in here because it's 0 indexed. But the price of this one is $39. If I look at the 10th one, that one's also $39. If I look at the 12th one, this one's also $39. So it's not that it got stuck somewhere and then, that like it doesn't work that way. Every single time that product block template renders, it's rendering for each individual product based on the data of that particular product. So I hope that this was useful. I know this was a very long video, but it's really important for you to wrap your head around how these templates work and what you can and can't do inside of them. Something else that I want to actually show you is that if I was to say something like function, and I create a new function called my custom function, or my third party function. It won't let me do that because I can't start with a number. So I'll say my third party function. And then it's going to receive a parameter. And I'm just going to say, I don't know, the prod. And then all I'm going to do is return prod.name. But I could have done anything inside of this function. Now, I'm going to come back over to my template. And again, just because this is, actually, hang on, let's do one better. Let's make this the price. So all I'm going to do is just return prod price. But this is the name of the function. So instead of my flag data local price, I'm actually going to go do this. Right? And then I'm going to come back over here, and then I'm going to add my little plus over here to turn that string back into a number. This is just regular JavaScript stuff. But this function is globally available. If you want to be sure, because who knows where the scope of things are, you could have said something like window dot, and then that function is equal to this function, right? So I'm just giving a name to this anonymous function called this, but it's globally available. And in my template, I'm just calling some function, and it's going to find it in the global scope, and then it's going to have this be the prod. So get rid of that. This will be the prod variable that function is going to get. It's going to pull the price, and it's going to return it. And then it's going to basically say, hey, whatever that is that less than 39 and flag. So my function should work exactly the same that it was a second ago. So if I hit save, nothing should change. I'm still displaying all of this, but it is using that function. If I want, I can come back in here just to prove it and say console.log prod.name prod.price. And if I go to my console, there it is. There's the names and the prices of everything that was returned. This is very, very powerful stuff. But again, if I come back over to the code and I grab this template again, because I would never recommend doing this, but you could just grab this, and I don't want a script tag inside of another script tag. But this, puts us right back to normal again. And now I can go make my modifications as needed.